Water, clear your throat, get ready for your lovely voice to be recorded.
Here we go.
Oh, by the way, Tyler, I spent time to listen to that podcast of yours. It's very natural and wow, just like Tyler.
Pinned. Okay. The top pinned tweet on the Twitter.
He got the podcast. I missed that.
No. I did somebody interviewed me for their podcast recently, is what she's talking about.
Yeah, and if you have no time to go through everything, just don't miss the first 10 seconds. You'll get the gist of Tyler.
Okay.
Air horn.
Oh, yes.
Audio effects.
Yes.
Air horn.
Have you recorded Chris John? So that he don't have to keep repeating to remind people to use burn. No, have you recorded Chris John so that he doesn't have to keep repeating, asking people to use the burner phone?
I'll stop. It gets old. My wife tells me I'm like an old record.
Broken record.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Happy Friday. Let's do it. October 15th.
Let's do this.
Microsoft is the biggest story is the Wall Street Journal article that broke while we were in the room last time, about 12 hours ago, that the Microsoft is shuttering the Chinese version of LinkedIn and replacing it with a job board. Sources say China told LinkedIn in March to better regulate content. Actually, more than that. There was a headline about a week ago that we read together all about that China was telling... No, actually, the headline a week ago was some journalists and academics had come to learn that their profile was not available on the Chinese version of LinkedIn. And strangely, they seemed a little upset about that, which I don't think they should. And now nobody's profile is available in LinkedIn in China. And I wonder how they feel, those people who are complaining that their profile, the dozen or so folks who weren't on the Chinese version of LinkedIn, I would love to go back to them and be like, yes, last week you were complaining that your profile was not available in China. Now no profiles are available in China. How do you feel about your profile not being available now? So essentially, it's a bit tricky to run. And by the way, as this article from the Wall Street Journal correctly points out, LinkedIn was the only American, social media-ish tech company operating in China. That raises an interesting question as to why that was. It seems, I can imagine that LinkedIn is a very valuable tool in China, and they were willing to try it, and unfortunately it just doesn't work out because it's very difficult to control what people say on that platform, especially if, LinkedIn is a whole bunch of Americans, and if it's existing in both, those are two different internets, essentially. You're operating inside of the Great Firewall of China, where a whole bunch of words are not allowed, and they must have been employing thousands of moderators to remove anytime anyone mentions anything Dear Leader doesn't like. That's quite a burden to do. It was an uncontrollable site, right? So they want to have very controlled sites, as evidenced by the fact that there was a headline, 3 days ago, that now all media, radio, you name it, newspapers, magazines. Oh, I didn't say magazines. It said news, TV, news, and radio must be 100% completely owned by the CCP with no private investors. That means Tencent cannot invest, Jack Ma cannot invest, nobody can invest. All the media is exclusively the property of one party in China, the CCP. So we can imagine that we can look forward to some incredibly balanced news coming out of China in the future, as if the CCP, China does happen to have, state-owned media like Xinhua News and the People's Daily, but they also have the South China Morning Post, which is owned by Alibaba, which is still in some sense owned by Jack Ma, which still does actually really good journalism. And you've heard me say that a dozen times, if not 100 times. And you've also heard me say in recent weeks, in fact, recent days, boy, that's the South China Morning Post is begging to be canceled. Like, holy shit, I can't believe they even are able to operate and publish some of these headlines that we've read even in the last week. And then sure enough, a couple days ago, bada boom, bada bing, no more private media. So they figured out a way to shut down South China Morning Post without even naming South China Morning Post. And why just shut down South China Morning Post when somebody could regurgitate it and resurrect it in some other form? Right, let's come up with a more robust solution to that whack-a-mole and just ban it all wholesale. Just boom, no more media that is not the CCP media. Well, that's a clever, efficient carpet bombing way to kill all the moles in your front yard. Just drop a nuclear bomb on your front yard. That'll get rid of the moles. So, kudos again to the CCP for their incredible effectiveness in addressing challenges.
We did it, everybody.
They did it. They figured out how to stop people from having opinions in their country. It's amazing. So, yeah, and LinkedIn, in that context, I say all of that to highlight how impossible it would have been to operate LinkedIn in China. It's amazing it lasted as long as it did. And China kept telling LinkedIn, hey, LinkedIn, remove this piece of content, remove this piece of content. No doubt they were getting thousands of requests a day, if you think about it. And LinkedIn was like, enough's enough. Like, it ain't worth it. I mean, yes, we're making billions of dollars, but at some point, it's not worth it. So there you go. No more LinkedIn in China. So, and do the math on that. Do the little napkin math. Know how much money were they making? Turns out it was their third largest market on the planet, and they make $1 billion a year. Right? So imagine you own LinkedIn. Imagine LinkedIn's making you $1 billion a year. Imagine China's your third biggest market and probably growing. Probably going to be the second biggest in the not distant future. And yet you're getting so many very strongly worded messages saying, take this down or else we will fine you. Lots of big fines. Imagine you're getting thousands of requests. How many requests a day would you need to receive to say, you know what, fuck it, it ain't worth it? 50? No, you're going to keep doing it if it's 50. 500? You're probably going to stay there even if it's 500 requests per day. You're going to have to build a whole big moderation team dedicated to China to cooperate and coordinate to remove all the content each day that they don't like, right? At what point do you say, you know what? It ain't worth it. It's going to have to be a shit ton of the requests to comply. It's going to have to be a whole lot of headache to comply with. So that's the interesting update. A White House official.
What if Tyler, do you think it's what they're asked to comply with?
No, they know what, I mean, everybody knows before they get in bed with China what they're going to have to comply with. You're just going to have to do whatever they say whenever they say, and they say jump, you say how high, or...
Well, what I mean is like, do you think they may be silencing a lot of the Xinjiang reporting?
Of course.
And that's like so atrocious that they're just like, you know what, we got to just cut bait.
No, they knew that was going to be the case from day one. That was clearly written in the agreement. Interestingly, in this Wall Street Journal article, the second to last sentence says, a White House official said the administration welcomed the move. Oh, maybe the U.S. didn't like LinkedIn operating in China. Maybe the U.S., we can pull up the receipts that a whole lot of people with a lot of expertise, China has an actual national initiative to attract the smartest people on the planet in all the different sciences to bring those brains into China. And they pay very handsomely for that. And LinkedIn can be potentially a very valuable resource in executing that nationally huge grand plan called, it's called like Chinese Brain 2025 or whatever it's called. And so the White House knows that, of course. And so the White House applauding LinkedIn stopping business in China, that's kind of peculiar on its face. And And perhaps the U.S. was telling LinkedIn that we don't like you doing that over there. It's not helpful to the U.S. that all of our, every professional in America is in a database, searchable and yada yada, and all of these cyber attacks that are happening everywhere. Well, they're probably trying to get into the computers of these very smart people to find out, what kind of interesting stuff they're up to, and perhaps compromise them, and perhaps do a little, copying of their homework and all of their interesting stuff that they're working on. So, just a thought. Why the White House applauds LinkedIn departing from China? Interesting scenario there. Paul Moser, who covers China and all of Asia really for the New York Times and has for a while, and he's brilliant, and I highly recommend following. He's brilliant to follow on Twitter. He's one of the last few journalists in the region who he did try to go to Xinjiang in a car. That was when China started cracking down on all Western non-Chinese journalists in China. He was working in China for a very long time. And by the way, he's actually very good friends with our friend David Chang. And David introduced me to Paul. And I knew Paul before I knew David. Like, I was following Paul even before I even knew David Chang here in Clubhouse, because he's the New York Times guy for China. And anyway, he knew that the Western journalists were getting kicked out of China. So he was like, fuck it, let's get in the car and let's go to Xinjiang and let's see what's going on before they kick us out. That didn't work out so well. It was a nice try. Didn't work out at all. No. They don't want anyone, let alone a journalist, let alone a New York Times journalist, getting anywhere near Xinjiang province. So that was not going to happen. And then he was quickly shown out and will never be allowed back in. Because they love transparency. They have nothing to hide. So Paul took to Twitter and wrote a piece for the New York Times in relation to this topic of LinkedIn shutting down in China. So the New York Times version that Paul wrote says LinkedIn to shut down service in China, citing challenging environment, is the New York Times headline on this topic. The Microsoft-owned service had censored posts in China in compliance with the country's laws to operate there. A significantly more challenging operating environment and a greater compliance requirements. Okay, but then he tweets out he adds a little context. He says, LinkedIn's China operations were once a tentative model for foreign internet firms to follow, partner with a savvy VC firm, censor content as lightly as possible, and get access to China. 7 years on, the experiment has proven a failure. For its efforts, LinkedIn ticked off both DC and Beijing. Earlier this year, we reported China's internet regulator rebuked LinkedIn for its failure to control political content. When it took down more content, it earned a rebuke from Congress. Oh, so Congress was getting upset. The U.S., Washington, was getting upset with LinkedIn for removing the content in China. The LinkedIn project epitomized the excitement of tapping a Chinese internet outsiders assumed would be boom and liberalize. Those hopes are gone. Most U.S. firms gave up. One of China's great innovations turned out to be its incredible ability to censor. Okay, so I'm tweeting Paul's tweet to the Tech News Twitter account so you can see Paul's account. And great person to follow on Twitter. Very informative if you want to know what's going on the ground in China, where he speaks Chinese. He covers China for New York Times. Very smart dude. Anyway, second biggest article of today. WhatsApp starts rolling out end-to-end encryption for chat history backups in Icloud and Google Drive. WhatsApp is beginning to roll out a new feature that will provide its 2 billion users the option to encrypt their chat history backup in iCloud or Google Drive, patching a major loophole. Patching a major loophole that has been exploited by governments to obtain and review private communication between individuals. Meaning it's not encrypted. Meaning that's nice. You thought you were using an encrypted platform. The governments still can see everything. And by the way, there's the dystopian version of that comes to mind first, which is, oh shit, they're able to see everything. Well, yeah, but potentially a lot of bad actors and potentially international terrorist groups were potentially using it, thinking they were protected, and they weren't. Interesting to think how many quote unquote bad folks were using it thinking they were secure, and they weren't. On that note, the FBI invested over $1 million in a end-to-end encryption startup yesterday. That was an interesting headline. So the story continues. WhatsApp has long encrypted chats between users and its app, but users have had no means to protect the backup of those chats stored in the cloud. For iPhone users, the chat history stored in iCloud. For Android users, rely on Google Drive. It has been widely reported that law enforcement agencies across the globe have been able to access the private communications between suspect individuals on WhatsApp by exploiting this loophole. WhatsApp, which processes over 100 billion messages a day, is closing the weak link and tells that it's providing this new feature to users in every market where the app is operational. The feature is optional, the company said. And it's not uncommon for companies to withhold privacy features for legal and regulatory reasons. Apple's new encrypted browsing feature isn't available to users in certain authoritarian regimes. Oh, you can't do encrypted browsing. Apple disables that in a few interesting countries, such as China, Belarus, Egypt, Kazakhstan, Saudi Arabia, Turkmenistan, Uganda, and the Philippines. You know, those super transparent, democracy-loving countries. You know,
Gold standard for freedom.
The creme de la creme of civil liberties. And Mark Zuckerberg, founder and chief executive of Facebook, noted that WhatsApp is the first global messaging service at this scale to offer end-to-end encrypted messaging and backups. Proud of the team for continuing to lead on security for our private conversations, he wrote. So I want to circle back in that last paragraph. When it says it's providing this new feature to users in every market where the app is operational, I guess countries can ban it, meaning, yeah, so those countries that we just named, yeah, maybe it's not available in China. China's like, no, thank you. We don't want that app in here. And potentially those other countries we named who don't let Apple operate in an encrypted way, they obviously won't allow other apps who are operating in an encrypted way because they want access. Okay, so next up is from Ars Technica, how a U.S. hacker built a secret network of news sites, and news is in quotes, a secret network of news sites and Facebook groups to push bogus stories after an undisclosed company hired him to sway the 2016 election. He was hired to build a fake news operation, but now wants to put things right. This is the story of the mastermind behind one of the largest fake news operations in the U.S. For 2 years, he ran websites and Facebook groups that spread bogus stories, conspiracy theories, and propaganda. Under him was a dedicated team of writers and editors paid to produce deceptive content, from outright hoaxes to political propaganda, with the supreme goal of tipping the 2016 election to Donald Trump. Through extensive efforts, he built a secret network of self-reinforcing sites from the ground up. And what that means is, you can think of Wikipedia, where in Wikipedia, every page you read links to 10 other pages inside Wikipedia. And that creates a powerful network, a rabbit hole, right? Where they all kind of lift each other up. YouTube creators do the same, where they make an alliance or a network where I have my YouTube channel, Cheryl and Lakeisha and Shane and Jay have their YouTube channels, and I make videos about them, they make videos about me, and we lift each other up and we share each other's traffic, and it creates this network. So you get this really nice network effect. Well, this guy was doing the same with all of his fake news, that he would link them to each other. They looked like 10 separate websites or news sources who were verifying each other and quoting each other. So it's a very clever way to create a little network of media. And through extensive efforts, he built a secret network of self-reinforcing sites from the ground up. He devised a strategy that got prominent personalities, including Trump, to retweet misleading claims to their followers. And he fooled unwary American citizens, including the hacker's own father, into regarding fake news sources more highly than the mainstream media. Pundits and governments just might have given Russia too much credit, he says, when the whole system of manipulating people's perceptions in psychology was engineered and operated from within the U.S. Here's his quote: Russia played such a minor role that they weren't even a blip on the radar, the hacker told the journalist here from Ars Technica. This was normal for politicians, though. If you say a lie enough times, everyone will believe it. Previously dubbed Hacker X, he's now ready to reveal who he is and how he did it. The fake news impresario who has now decided to break his silence is ethical hacker Robert Willis. Some in the information security community might know Rob today as an active member who speaks at conferences and works with the Secura Samurai ethical hacking group. The Secura Samurai have, on many occasions, responsibly disclosed vulnerabilities in the computer systems of governments and private entities. I've previously interacted with Rob on about 2 occasions minimally when I had questions regarding Secura Samurai's vulnerabilities. But back in 2015, Willis was just another hacker looking for an IT job. He had already received 1 job offer, but still had an interview scheduled at a final company. I was thinking of not showing up for the interview. I had, after all, just committed to another company. I showed up at the location, which was a large corporate building. I was given directions to wait downstairs until I was collected. The secretness was intriguing. It may have turned some people off, but I love an adventure, and I had not been given any information on the job other than that they were very excited because to find someone like me was very rare. I had tons of random, overlapping, highly technical skills from years of wearing multiple hats at smaller private companies. Even before, at the interview site, a man came down to get him, and they rode the elevator to a floor with a nearly empty office. Inside waited a woman beside 3 chairs. They all sat. His hosts finally revealed the name of their company, Koala Media. The moment felt like an orchestrated big reveal. I wasn't scared, but excited at how crazy this was already turning out to be. I listened. I was told there were big plans for the office I was sitting in, and they had already hired the internal writers and editors for the news operation. The interviews at the company told Willis that everything was to be built with security in mind at extreme levels. Should he get the job, his primary role would be to rapidly expand a single popular website already owned by Koala Media. For this, they needed someone with Willis's diverse set of skills. They told me that they were against big companies and big government because they were basically the same thing. They said they had readers on the right and on the left, and they said they were about freedom. That sounded okay to Willis, who describes himself as a social liberal and fiscal conservative, very punk rock, borderline anarchist. Then the interview told him, if you work for us, you can help stop Hillary Clinton. He says, I hated the establishment. Republicans and Democrats, and Hillary was the target because she was as establishment as it got and was the only candidate that was all but guaranteed to be running on the main ticket. If I were to choose a lesser evil at the time, it would have, without a doubt, been the Republican Party, blah, blah, blah. Willis says he had no indication of the gun. So this is a super long article now, and they're going into all the details of this whole story. It sounds like the beginnings of a draft for a movie script almost. And it talks about cancer curing lemons and all kinds of crazy schemes that they cooked up in this crazy fake news network and how they made it. And it's a very long story. So I will tweet it out so people can save it and read the whole long story. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. The real question is who was really behind it, I guess. Let me see if I can skip. If somebody can check out the tweet I just shared to the Tech News Twitter account and maybe check through that, we can figure out who was behind it at the end of the day. Financing it, I mean. Anyway. Okay, so the next one is from the Record. Google Threat Analysis Group says it tracks 270 state-backed threat actors and sent 50,000 alerts for email phishing attacks to Gmail users in 2021. Hold on, let's break this one open. Google says it tracks 270 state-sponsored groups, meaning state-sponsored hacking groups. So 270 state-sponsored hacking groups based across 50 different countries. The Google Threat Analysis Group said today that its security researchers are currently tracking more than 270 different government-backed threat actors activating from inside more than 50 countries. The figures include groups engaged in both cyber espionage operations but also disinformation campaigns, Google said in a report today. When attacks performed by these groups, including phishing emails, Google says it also sends email alerts to the targeted Gmail users. Oh, that's nice. We happen to know that some state hacking group just sent you a phishing email to try and hack into your account. Please don't click on the link that you just received in your previous email. Or I imagine they have an even more clever way of putting it right in that email that you got from that state hacking group that says, please don't click on this link from your friendly FBI. Or from Google, rather. When attacks performed by these groups, so far in 2021, we sent over 50,000 warnings, a nearly 33% increase from this time in 2020. According to Ajax Bash, a Google analyst said today, the spike is largely due to blocking an unusually large campaign from a Russian actor known as APT28, or Fancy Bear, as it's called in the biz. Oh, what a shock. What a surprise. I'm so confused. I all this time I thought it was, Norway who was doing all of this hacking on American companies. Turns out it was Russia, everybody. According to Google, I know what you were thinking. You thought it was, Canada. Turns out, not so much. Turns out it's wildly, it's just such a shock. The world is real. I mean, this news is just breaking everywhere. The whole world's coming to terms with the fact that our dear friends over there in Russia are actually sending a lot of state-backed hacks. The spike is largely due to blocking an unusually large campaign from a Russian actor known as Fancy Bear. But even if Fancy Bear was responsible for the largest attack this year, Google said that another group was more active, named APT35. Also tracked as Charming Kitten. And APT35, newscaster, Ajax security team, Phosphorus, and Group 83. The group is believed to operate under the protection of the Iranian government. Oh, this is so weird. All of our very closest and dearest friends, Russia and Iran and China, turns out they're hacking us, guys. This is really weird. For years, this group has hijacked accounts, deployed malware, and used novel techniques to conduct espionage aligned with the interests of the Iranian government. Past attacks included several phishing emails modeled around the Munich Security and the Think 20 Italy political conferences and use a spyware-infested VPN app uploaded on the Google Play Store. Oh, lovely. There's a VPN that if you download it, actually just hacks you. That's nice. In 2021, the group hacked the website of the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London and used it to host a phishing kit. Oh, lovely. The group then went on to send email messages with links to the hacked site to harvest credentials for platforms such as Gmail, Hotmail, and Yahoo. Here's a quote. Users were instructed to activate on invitation to a fake webinar by logging in. The phishing kit will also ask for second-factor authentication codes sent to devices. And there's your daily update that Chris is using a burner phone. And the phishing kit will also ask for second-factor authentication codes sent to the device, referring to a campaign documented earlier this year. So that's the update. The next one. is from Bloomberg. They say they have sources that the SEC is poised to let the first Bitcoin futures ETF from ProShares and Invesco trade in the U.S. as early as next week. Oh shit, everybody. That could put some upward pressure on the price of Bitcoin, rather notably, actually. Which the timing of this is quite interesting because it's already about to test the resistance point of its all-time high of 60,000. If it breaks through 60,000, it's likely to go considerably higher. How much higher, we don't know because it's never been above that. But if you look at technical trading, which Bitcoin does tend to follow a lot of technical trading, that is very likely to cause Bitcoin to break through its all-time high of 60,000, and let's see how high it'll go. Because a Bitcoin ETF will allow people to essentially, not exactly, but essentially buy Bitcoins like shares on a stock market. In the same way that you can buy kind of gold ETFs, and there's other ETFs that are kind of synthetic-ish. I don't know what.
When is this going live, Tyler?
It says
Tomorrow?
next week.
From Invesco?
Yes, Invesco and ProShares.
Look at that. Okay.
But keep in mind, this means a whole bunch of people who would like to, who believe in the up, that Bitcoin is going to go up, who don't want to go through the hassle of actually going through the traditional Bitcoin processes because they want a little faster liquidity or whatnot, because they've got their money in their trading account and they don't want to remove it from there and put it into, a separate Bitcoin account. Boy, there could be billions of dollars that flood into Bitcoin. And because if the ETF goes up, the Bitcoin folks are going to watch that and be like, oh, it's trading above where it is currently in real Bitcoin trading on the exchanges, the Bitcoin exchanges or the crypto exchanges.
Yeah, but the ETF should track the underlying, commodity, whatever. It should track Bitcoin. It shouldn't lead Bitcoin. It should track Bitcoin.
It can, though. If in the first week of trading on an ETF, you got a whole bunch of people who probably been waiting for this for quite a long time.
Well, I think the question will be, if I'm Invesco and I'm launching this, okay, I've probably purchased some amount of Bitcoin that I think I'm going to need to fund the ETF. So
Yep.
I don't think it's,
right.
Right. So I don't think necessarily, as people, what I'm saying, they'll buy the ETF, but the Bitcoin's already there.
Mm-hmm.
It should be anyway.
So the next one about Coinbase. Coinbase asks Congress Coinbase is the largest U.S.-based cryptocurrency exchange, which had a massive IPO a few months ago, one of the world's largest ever. Coinbase asks Congress to regulate digital assets outside of the existing financial system and to create a special regulator for digital assets markets. Yeah, they want to comply. They want to do everything by the book, and they don't, because they're a publicly traded company. They want really clear guidelines so they can drive the car faster, because they don't want to be driving and putting the pedal to the metal when the lines on the road aren't clearly painted. And there's a whole lot of interesting areas up ahead in crypto land where the regulators have not yet clearly defined the lines. So Coinbase is saying, could you please paint those lines further up the highway so we can go ahead and hit the gas pedal and not worry about going over the lines and then you coming in and saying we did something wrong, because we don't want to do it wrong. We're asking you to paint the lines. We would like to go a lot faster. Could you please hurry up and paint those lines on that highway up that road ahead there? Thank you very much. That would be very nice. Yeah, makes sense. Because they've already gotten a little taste of, the SEC has already sent them threats of suing them for driving outside of the lines. And in particular, it was a headline about 2-3 weeks ago where Coinbase says we're going to have a new product called Lend, where if you have coins in our system, you're going to be able to borrow against those holdings. And the SEC says, no, you don't. No, you do not. You cannot do that. And Coinbase is like, WTF, bro? We messaged you and said we were planning to do this. We even went to Washington, D.C. and request to meet with your apparently too busy ass. All the other agencies in Washington, D.C. met with us. You're the only ones who didn't. We were trying to tell you we wanted to do this. We were warning, signaling to everybody we're planning to do this. Now you didn't want to meet with us. We're letting the public know we're planning to do this. And now you're responding saying, now we can't do that. Okay, great. So please paint the rules of the road, because you're telling us we can't do it as Coinbase, but here's 50 of our competitors who are doing it. Are you threatening to sue them? So why don't you paint the lines on the basketball court so we know when the ball's in or out, so that all of our competitors will have to follow the same rules, because as it is right now, you're only holding us to follow the rules and not these 50 other companies who are doing the same thing. So please, we beg you, figure out what the fuck you want to do with crypto and all of the digital assets and whatnot. Get your shit straight, make your little rule book, paint the lines on the court so we can play this game and wipe you all out. Please, pretty please, can you please make some fucking decisions here about how you want this to work? Because we're ready. We got our shoes on. We got our new Air Jordans. We got a brand new basketball here, and we're ready to dunk on your asses. We're going to wipe you the fuck out as soon as you blow this fucking whistle and flip this coin. We got our game face on. So please, for the sake of everybody, let's get this game on.
Hey, Tyler, I need to take a step back here.
Go ahead.
Just took a look at the article that you were talking about,
Yeah.
the Bitcoin ETF. It's really important for people to understand that this ETF that we're talking about, which, by the way, they have not. Everyone's assuming because there's a deadline for the SEC, I guess, to approve this. They're just going to let the deadline get there, and therefore it's going to get like tacit approval. But it's based on Bitcoin futures, not actual Bitcoin.
Yes.
They haven't approved. Okay, and just so everyone should realize this, because so you don't get into any kind of trouble with any kind of ETF that's based on futures. It could be gold, it could be oil, it could be gas. Usually it's not gold, but usually I've seen it with natural gas and oil. If it's based on futures, the value of the ETF could be very different than the underlying thing it's supposed to track. Correct. Because the way futures contracts work. Okay. And so you need to be aware of that, because a lot of people get burnt on that. I mean, I've seen natural gas ETFs that are based on futures where the natural gas is going up and the futures are going, and the ETF's going down, or vice versa. So they don't really track necessarily that well. So you need to be very careful with ETFs that are based on futures rather than ETFs that actually hold the asset. It's a big difference.
So by the way, the Bitcoin jumped, or rather notably, when this news broke a few hours ago already, just on the headline of this.
I'm sure. I mean, because it's going to probably have an impact on I guess it's a futures market for Bitcoin. I haven't.
Yep, it says
looked at it.
The headline from CoinDesk is Bitcoin spikes after Bloomberg reports SEC won't block futures ETF. So the next one is Google rolls out continuous scrolling for English language mobile search results in the US. Google announced today it's changing the way search works on mobile devices, initially in the US. Now, when you reach the bottom of a set of search results on your phone, you won't have to tap to the go to next page. 20 years after the company started, you get all those beautiful blue links all on one page now. Next up, from the Washington Post, they've done a profile of somebody named Cher Scarlett, an Apple employee. Oh, let me guess. She's got some interesting leaky info. A Washington Post profile of Cher Scarlett, an Apple employee leading the Apple II campaign, #Apple2, highlighting racism, retaliation, sexual, and other forms of workplace harassment. And Cher Scarlett is willing to risk a dream job at Apple to blow the whistle on alleged labor violations at the iPhone maker. Cher Scarlett grew up poor and dropped out of high school. As a teenager, she struggled with addiction, danced as a stripper, and tried to overdose on pills. Her ticket to the better life was learning to code, Last year, she became perhaps the least probable member of Apple's elite software engineering team. But the storied tech giant, Scarlett says, turned out to be a place that blithely enables discrimination against women and others historically underrepresented groups. By the way, she appears, I'm looking at a very up-close, detailed photo of her. She appears to be Caucasian. So discriminate against women and other historically underrepresented groups, including disabled people. Oh, really? Apple discriminates against disabled people? Really? That's kind of interesting because every keynote that Apple's done in the past decade highlights the rather groundbreaking work they do in accessibility. I would love anyone with disabilities in the audience to jump on stage and share their impressions of Apple, because the only things I have ever heard on this front is the disabled community, the hard of hearing, hard of seeing, love Apple because they are far ahead of anybody else in the hardware space.
Hans is in the audience, I think.
Yeah, Hans can answer this.
Yep. Raise your hand, Hans.
Let's figure out here if this rings true with people from this community here. Let's see, where's Mr. Hans?
Okay, I'll pin him again.
Okay. So, here's a quote. Apple does not care about its employees. It cares about money. Scarlett said in an interview, maybe that's capitalism and that's just the way corporations are. Yes, Cher. That is capitalism and that's just the way corporations are. That's right. You answered your own question there, Cher. But I can't live my life further accepting it and not saying something about it. Oh, okay. Well, there are countries that don't operate under these capitalistic-like systems. And have you tried visiting them? Would be my first question. I happen to have lived in some of those countries from time to time. And there are strengths and weaknesses. Apple declined to comment on her specific allegations or specific employee matters and said it is committed to a positive, inclusive workplace. Scarlett's story, as told to the Washington Post, is part of a growing chorus of tech workers, many of them women, challenging the power centers of Silicon Valley, where some of them allege companies are still run like frat houses and discrimination against women and racial minorities continues to make headlines. In recent years, more than 20,000 Google employees staged a walkout to protest sexual misconduct and inequality, while black women at Pinterest accused the company of discrimination and retaliation. Just last month, Amazon settled a wrongful termination suit against 2 women it fired after they publicly criticized the company's climate policies. Yeah, we read that headline. But so far, I'm not aware of any suits or settlements by any tech companies where anyone has been able to force a tech company to make any kind of settlements for their discrimination as is being alleged here. Did we get Hans on stage? No?
Yeah, I pinned him.
Okay. I thought you said he was in the room. Sorry.
Yeah, he was in the room just now, but I think he left. But it's okay. I'll pin him again.
Okay. So, last Tuesday, former Facebook employee Frances Haugen became the highest profile tech whistleblower of all when she testified before Congress that Facebook misled the public about the harm caused by its products. This is an industry with pronounced racism and misogyny problems, says Meredith Whitaker, a former Google employee who helped lead the walkout there. Whitaker, as well as Timnit Gebru, who was fired from Google after she raised questions about the ethics of its AI ambitions, has spoken with Scarlett about her efforts